Thank you, Gerald, for your opening remarks. So powerful to talk about systems change and the work that you're doing. And also, no one told me, Zeev, that we would be following Ronald McDonald, so that's a bit troubling. I'm Reba Dominski. It's such a pleasure on behalf of everyone at US Bank for us to be here with you today. I thought we'd introduce ourselves in a little bit of a different way. You can read our bios, but what I wanted to do was share a little bit about, for each of us to share a little bit about kind of who we are and what brings us to this work. And then I have a challenge for my colleagues here, Greg and Sunil, which is I want you to describe what you do at US Bank in 1 to 2 sentences for the group. And I'll take the lead to give you just a little bit of time to think about that. So again, my name is Reba Dominski. I am Chief Social Responsibility Officer and the head of the US Bank Foundation. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I came to this country from India when I was 2 years old. And I was raised by a single mother in Detroit. And my mother had this poster that hung on our kitchen wall. It's still there today. And the poster had a quote from Rabindranath Tagore. And the quote was this: "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and found that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy." And I truly believe that that quote and my mother's legacy brought me to the work that I do today at US Bank. And how I describe that in one sentence is I have the privilege, I have the honor, I have the responsibility of helping over 70,000 US bankers make decisions every single day that are good for people and for the planet. With that, Sunil, I'm going to put you on the spot. Would you share?
Yeah, sure. It's tough to go after Ronald McDonald and then Reba. Thank you, Reba. Good morning. It's great to be with all of you. I'm Sunil Rajpurohit. I serve as the Chief Investment and Product Officer for US Bancorp Impact Finance, which is a subsidiary of US Bank that provides financial solutions that help create positive and lasting impact in our communities and the environment. And I'll keep it at that. Greg.
Greg Cunningham. It's so great to see everybody. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer at US Bank. And 2 sentences, what I do, I've never had more job clarity in my career, and it's very simply 2 things. Number 1, the power, the potential for our 3 most critical stakeholders. That's our employees, our customers, and our communities. And then secondly, I ensure that diversity, equity, and inclusion are a business imperative across our entire organization.
Thank you so much. You did a pretty good job with that. Thank you. So one of the other reasons that we're so excited to be here is because the summit is in Chicago, and Chicago is the site of one of our most important, impactful, significant place-based initiatives. And that place-based initiative is in the Pullman community on the south side of Chicago. Now, I see some claps and snaps out there. If you haven't been to Pullman and you have time on this trip or another, go to Pullman. Let me tell you a little bit about Pullman. Pullman is the home of the famous Pullman Car Company. They created luxury rail cars, and in the early 19th or 20th century, they employed a significant number of African Americans. And the union and the Pullman porters, you should learn about that phrase and learn about the porters, played a very significant role in our country's history, both in the civil rights movement and the labor movement. So I encourage you to spend some time in Pullman. In fact, the 3 of us were in Pullman yesterday. Our partner in Pullman is an organization called Chicago Neighborhood Initiatives, and their CEO is here. His name is David Doig, and he took us on a tour of Pullman. And I hadn't been to Pullman since the pandemic, and I could not believe how in just a couple of years and through a pandemic, Pullman has transformed. And so since we couldn't take all of you to Pullman, we thought we'd bring a little bit of Pullman to you. We shot a video a couple of years ago featuring a Pullman resident. His name is Jalen, and we'd love to show you that video now.
Later, TT.
Bye, baby.
If you had to describe this neighborhood, what would that be?
There's nothing like Pullman. It's my place.
What are some of the changes you've seen over the past 5 years within the Pullman neighborhood?
Well, I finally feel like we're included. We're here. And I now see that we're getting acknowledged.
There's been like a boom of growth in the Pullman area that was really needed. I see a new generation of kids that are really doing their own thing. They are aware of their community, they are aware of what's going on in the world, and I believe that they're looking for ways to contribute.
If you had to describe the people of Pullman to an outsider, what would that be?
Family. I know it's crazy because family traditionally is people of the same ethnicity, same creed, but family here is everything.
There's nothing like Pullman. It's my place. My people, my family. Pullman is home.
Thank you. Yeah, that video gets me every time I'm seeing some emotion in the crowd. You know Pullman. Yeah, it is. It's a beautiful depiction of a very important community. And you saw the end card, but I will tell you, in the last 15 years, U.S. Bank has invested $110 million. I actually think it's up to $125 million with recent investments in the Pullman community. And one of the questions that David asked us yesterday when we were in that community, and I would ask all of you who make investments like this in community, is he said the real test is, has the neighborhood improved? You know, we talk about how to measure social impact, and one of the simple ways to do that is to say, has the neighborhood improved? And so yesterday, David shared a couple of stats with us, which I want to share with you. And this is, again, over the 15-year time frame that U.S. Bank has been investing. Incomes in Pullman are up 16%. There's a 15% increase in residents with 4-year college degrees, and Pullman has several Tier 1 schools in the community. Crime is down 24%. Violent crime is down 52%. So those are some stats. Thank you. It's amazing what a little economic development will do. Those are some of the stats that we wanted to share with all of you. But what I want to turn to Sunil and Greg to do now is help us understand both what we did, Sunil, I'll ask you to speak to that, and then Greg, how we did it and what we learned. So Sunil, we'll start with you.
Sure. Thank you, Reba. I think, over the years, it's been such a joy to work in collaborating with the Pullman community and the work we brought to that community over the years. I'll say, looking back at it from the outset, there were two things that we recognized early on. Number one, we felt we needed to bring in the full bank to be able to make a lasting impact, meaningful impact, as Reba mentioned. And number two, we felt that we would needed to really bring in a holistic neighborhood approach, which went beyond housing, to be able to deliver on opportunities related to local employment, education, recreation, and other services, to be able to comprehensively uplift the local communities. And so, in terms of the whole bank coming together, as Reba alluded to, over the years, we have pumped in over $110 million worth of new capital into the Pullman community. And $70 million and plus of that comes from U.S. Bancorp Impact Finance by virtue of the tax credit investments of various types that we have invested in, as well as associated lending solutions. And as our partners, Chicago Neighborhood Initiatives, would tell you, according to their assessment, our sort of investments further catalyzed an additional $370 million worth of new money from other public and private sources, which also found its way into Pullman over the past decade or so. So you bring those two buckets together. A staggering $500 million worth of new money, new capital has flown into the Pullman neighborhoods in a concentrated manner to deliver the impact that you guys saw and that Reba just talked about. And so if you think about, and Reba, you mentioned about the impact, and if we can make it measurable, if we can sort of, make sure that it is felt. It's felt by the residents, it's felt by everyone. And so I can attest personally, having visited yesterday, as Reba mentioned, you look at some of the statistics. 1,500 permanent jobs have been added by virtue of these investments. And it's even more remarkable when you compare that with the fact that, the immediate neighborhood is 10,000 strong. There's 10,000 people in the immediate neighborhoods. So in some sense, 15% of that population has direct access to local employment. Isn't that impact? Isn't that measurable? Isn't that felt? For sure it is. $2 million worth of commercial, industrial, and recreational space has been added. That is impact. That's measurable. That's felt. Residential property values have increased 136% in this time frame. That is felt. And all through these efforts, it's been recognized that US Bank's expertise in tax credit investments, deal construction, operational governance was a key enabler in revitalizing the neighborhood, obviously in close partnership with our partners in C&I and David Doig. I'm sure he's hiding somewhere under the table or chair here. But then, lastly, if you look at the elements of the holistic neighborhood approach that I talked about, which really was a lens with which we used our investments and that guided our investment philosophy. So when you have Walmart and other retailers come into this neighborhood, they're not just bringing jobs with a commitment to local hiring. They're also providing a much-needed grocer to what was historically a food desert. Method Soap and Whole Foods Distribution Center have also brought in high-paying jobs into the neighborhood. And we, as US Bank, donated a large tract of land and pumped in additional tax credit dollars to build a $30 million US Bank Pullman Community Center, which opened in 2018. And it's a state-of-the-art, year-round, indoor, recreational, and educational complex. And then on the housing side, Pullman Arts Lofts, which is a housing which was introduced into Pullman for the first time. New housing came into Pullman in last 50 years for the first time ever. How cool is that? We were able to rehab 2 historic buildings and add in a few more new construction to give a total of 38 affordable housing units to that community, and with a preference to sort of house our local artists in those units. So if you take all of the stock together of this various impact initiatives over the course of 15 years, Pullman is definitely a shining example, but it's one of the many examples that we have at the US Bank wherein the power of one bank coming together is delivering a lasting impact. Reba.
Wow, well said. Greg, I'll ask you to talk about, that was the what, the how, and some of the learnings.
Sunil talked about the importance of bringing the whole bank, and I think that was the most important thing, Reba, as we realized you actually have to think about how do you bring all of the core competencies of the organization, like a US Bank, to problems like this. And I would say the second thing that was most important is we realized the importance of listening, that we didn't have the answers, and we needed a partner like C&I to really be that orchestrator who could bring community together, who could bring government together to really help us understand and build the trust that was necessary with community. Because certainly in banking and probably all of our business, trust is really the only currency we have. And so establishing that trust and credibility with the community was so vitally important. And then the third thing I would say, and was talked about at the very top of the meeting, was this notion of, oh my God, lost my train of thought for a second.
Get it, Pullman trains?
Was it?
He's doing that on purpose.
But the most important thing was really our ability to bring the entire organization and trust.
That's great. So one of the things that we're going to do now quickly is just talk about how we've kind of paid the learnings in Pullman forward. And I'll start with an example of an announcement that we made in 2023 about a $100 billion, that's billion with a B, dollar investment that we are making in community over the next 5 years. The 2 lessons from Pullman were the exact 2 lessons Greg just mentioned. The first was listening. We listened to over 200 community leaders as we built that plan. We took our CEO, he sat through all of our listening sessions. They talked about what they liked about the bank, and they talked about what they didn't like about the bank and what frustrated them in financial services. And we co-created the plan with those community partners. So we listened to those with lived experience and we co-created solutions. The second piece was bringing the whole bank. And I'm going to tell you something about this $100 billion commitment. It's focused on access to capital in low to moderate income communities, including communities of color. It is not a philanthropic plan. Believe me, I lead the foundation. I wish I had $100 billion to give in the next 5 years. It is a plan about mortgages, small business, community development, lending and investment, supplier diversity, workforce diversity, and philanthropy. And in year 1, we have launched 3 special purpose credit programs focused on mortgages, focused on small business lending, and focused on affordable housing development. And in the first year, we launched a $15 million philanthropic fund that we call the Opportunity Fund, focused on down payment assistance, small business technical assistance, and expanding rural in broadband and indigenous communities. So that plan is taking us all over the country in so many places and spaces, and we're learning so much. So one example of how we've carried those learnings forward. Greg, I'll ask you to speak to another one.
You know, I remember what I was trying to think about. It was systems change, and you know, the community benefit plan and all of the work that's gone into that is a really perfect example of the systems change that needed to happen within the organization for us to do this work. We had to break down silos. We had to think about how did we bring the business lines along on this journey with us. And then back in 2021, we launched a program called the Access Commitment. And the Access Commitment was really our way of thinking about how does the bank lean into these issues of social justice. Because we have a fundamental belief that there is no separation between social justice and economic justice. They're inseparable twins. You actually can't achieve one without the other. And so the Access Commitment was our way of identifying a very specific problem that we could bring our expertise to, excuse me, and that's closing the racial wealth gap. Access Commitment has 4 central components. Number one, the number one way that wealth gets transferred in this country, we all know, is through home ownership. So Access Home is our efforts, and there's a bunch of activities, including making sure that we have diverse mortgage loan officers, appraisers who can really sort of understand the lived experience and drive that part of the business. The second piece, and Sunil and the Impact Finance team are directly involved in this, and it's access to capital. How do we make sure we're getting capital in the hands of minority deposit institutions and CDFIs so that we can have more flexible credit policies and activity? The third area is access business. You know, there is no secret for all of us that most people are employed in small businesses, and there is no social program ever created that can replace a job. And so making sure that we are funding small businesses and creating opportunities for small businesses is a critical piece of it as well.
Sunil, any examples from you?
Yeah, sure. Reba, I think, you know, the slide's coming up, Little Tokyo neighborhood. It's, you know, where I live, Los Angeles. It's a neighborhood in downtown Los Angeles, folks. And it's one of the largest Japanese American populations in the entire North America. And in fact, portions of this neighborhood were also been declared as a National Historic Landmark District. So US Bancorp Impact Finance recently invested in a mixed-use affordable housing development. And that project happens to be one of the largest 100% affordable housing developments ever in the city of Los Angeles. It comprises 250 affordable housing units, as well as 40,000 square feet worth of commercial space. And if you think about the complexity of what we were able to accomplish, that wouldn't have been possible without the benefit of the innovative product platform we have at US Bancorp Impact Finance, which allowed us to sort of, you know, deploy a diversified product set, including a variety of tax credits, low-income housing tax credits, new market tax credits, associated construction debt lending solutions. And not only that, as Reba and Greg alluded to, the holistic approach, the systems thinking, we were also able to support our Little Tokyo Service Center, who's been a critical partner for us since 2009. We were able to provide additional $500,000 worth of charitable giving support to them for carrying on the critical work they do. And in addition, we also invested $10 million worth of new market tax equity dollars to build out a community center in this neighborhood. And if you think about what I shared on the Pullman side, again, it's a very similar approach to holistic neighborhood development and so on and so forth. And so if you bring all of these things together, you know, Little Tokyo is not just an example of how we are able to deliver a lasting impact in underserved communities across the nation. It is that, but it's not only that. To me and to us, and more importantly so, this is a manifestation of the vision that we have, of the role that an institution like US Bank can, should, and is playing towards betterment of our communities and the environment with an ability to scale and amplify these much-needed investments so that you go from Pullman to the Little Tokyo to the next project and further beyond. And so I'll wrap up by saying that while we are pleased, we are never satisfied and the work goes on. Reba.
Well said. So one thing, just as you all think about your investments, if you have the privilege of making them, when it really comes together for us is when we combine place-based and people-based investment. We talk a lot about place-based investment. People-based investment is a term that Greg and I coined in my car several years ago. I'm going to trademark it. That is when you find a place that needs support, and you find a person, like a David Doig, who has the vision for what that place can be, That's where I think the magic happens. 3 key lessons we want you to take away. 1, listen, co-create solution with community and those with lived experience. 2, make sure that your investments are connected to the strategic plan of your organization, and make sure there's a leader that will champion them at the highest level of the organization. 3, take partners. You cannot do this alone, as you heard from Gerald and others earlier. With that, we'll close out. Enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you, everybody.